I used to think writing a villain was easy, easier than writing a protagonist anyway. Basically, make them power hungry, make them cruel, give them a crappy backstory, and you're done. And then I started plotting my own novel, and I quickly realized that that kind of villain can be really boring for the reader. So I set off to create a villain with depth, someone with a backstory of their own, with a believable reason why they were the way they were. And today, I'm going to show you exactly how to achieve that. If you're new here, I'm Rita. I'm an aspiring fantasy author who's currently working on a novel that's inspired by Mulan. I also have a degree in English literature, which means I've spent an inordinate amount of time analyzing and studying stories and characters. In this video, I'm going to break down the 7 stages of a villain arc, and I'll be starting from the wound all the way to the consequence. And if you want the full written version of this guide, the blog post that this video is based on is going to be linked in the description below. All right, let's build you a villain. First, quick clarification. Not every antagonist is a villain, but every villain is an antagonist. Oh, but Rita, what do you mean? I'm going to tell you. So an antagonist is just anything that stands in the protagonist's way. So think Draco Malfoy or Gollum, or if you've watched Disney's Encanto, that emotionally manipulative abuela. A villain is different. They're an antagonist who causes major harm on purpose with conviction. This video is about villains, the ones whose internal arc drives the tension of the whole story. And if you're wondering what exactly is a villain arc, it's basically the villain's wound turning into worldview, turning into god-awful choices that are made, turning into consequences. That's it. So it's the slow progression of what hurt them, what they decided the world means, what they do about it, and what destroys them in the end. So let's walk through those 7 stages. And I'm going to use Voldemort as an example only because he follows a pretty straightforward villain arc and is popular enough that I'm not going to be giving away any spoilers. Stage 1 is the wound. Most villains start with an emotional injury, not just my parents died, so I'm going to be evil now. It's more like the moment that they learn something painful about the world. And in Voldemort's case, his wound is abandonment. So he grows up unwanted. He's sent to a muggle orphanage where he's clearly different from the other kids. So he learns attachment hurts, vulnerability is dangerous. And that belief becomes the seed. If you want a little take-home exercise, so to speak, write down the moment that taught your villain people aren't safe, love is weakness, power is survival, and the world is unfair. Now, stage 2 is the desire. What do they want? Not their plot goal, but their emotional goal. So the thing that they think will fix them. In good old Voldy's case, he wants absolute safety, which for him means immortality and control. As another exercise, name the one thing that your villain wants more than anything else, and write one sentence. They believe this will finally make them whole because. Stage 3 is the philosophy. So this is the most important stage, in my opinion. It's essentially their whole belief system. It's the story that they tell themselves to justify everything. In Voldemort's case, he believes that love is dangerous, that fear is effective, that weakness must be eliminated, and that purity determines worth. And that philosophy hardens as he gains power. An exercise for you is to list 3 core beliefs that your villain has, and then circle the one that's going to get more extreme over time. Stage 4 is escalation. Villains don't really jump from being a hurt child to Dark Lord overnight. There's an escalation that happens, and each choice they make traps them further. So Voldemort starts with cruelty. As Tom Riddle in the orphanage, he frightens the other children with magic on purpose. And then there's domination. At Hogwarts, he learns that power doesn't only come from hurting people, it also comes from controlling them. So Tom becomes charming, trusted, admired, while quietly manipulating others, including Professor Slughorn. He's not a monster in public yet. He's essentially building influence. Then he crosses the real line. He starts pursuing forbidden magic and committing acts that simply can't be undone. Then he literally splits his soul. He creates Horcruxes and he tears his soul apart to make himself immortal. And that is a point of no return for him, because at that stage, he's essentially destroying what's left of his own humanity just to feel untouchable. Another exercise for you is to map 3 decisions that your villain makes that raise the stakes each time. So that can be a small cruelty that leads to manipulation, that leads to murder. The 5th stage is dominance. This is when the villain's worldview becomes reality in the world. The villain's beliefs start shaping the setting. With Voldemort, you see this so clearly. He starts reshaping society. The ministry falls under his control, and suddenly the government isn't protecting people anymore. It's essentially hunting them instead. And by the final book, even Hogwarts, which is supposed to be the safest place in the series, is no longer safe. There are Death Eaters running the school. Punishment becomes ideological. Students aren't learning spells anymore. They're essentially learning what it feels like to live under a regime. And that's essentially dominance. The hero is forced to survive inside the villain's belief system. And just a quick note here, and obviously it's a shameless plug, but if you're listening to this and you're thinking, cool, all of this makes sense, but I have no idea how to actually map this onto my villain, that's exactly why I created the villain workbook. It breaks down these stages with prompts, like how your villain's influence shows up in the world, what their escalation beat looks like, and what cracks first when their control starts slipping. So you're not just learning theory, you're actually building the arc as you go. I'm going to link the villain workbook in the description below in case you want to check it out. All right, back to your regularly scheduled programming. Stage 6 is the fracture. Every villain has a blind spot. It's a flaw that they refuse to see, and it cracks their arc wide open. In Voldemort's case, he cannot understand love or sacrifice. He only understands power and fear-based control. He constantly miscalculates the people around him. He can't imagine someone choosing sacrifice over survival. So he assumes that loyalty is something you can buy or force. And because he rules through fear, even his own followers start lying and hesitating, and at the end they just abandon him the moment his control slips. He dismisses love as weakness, but it's the one force that he can't predict or control. And that blindness is exactly what undoes him in the end. As an exercise, identify the belief that your villain clings to even when it's destroying them. Now, the last stage is the consequence. The villain's downfall needs to feel unavoidable. It should be the final expression of their worldview. Voldemort's end works because it's the final result of the choices he made from the very beginning of the story. He tries to conquer death by splitting his soul. He tries to rule through terror instead of trust. He builds an entire empire based on fear, which means that the moment he weakens, everything around him is fragile. And in the end, Voldemort is defeated by the fact that his entire philosophy was unsustainable to begin with. The more he reaches for immortality and control, the more human connection slips from his grasp until there's nothing left to hold on to. As a final exercise, write one sentence. In the end, my villain is destroyed because XYZ. Their ending should not really feel random. It should feel like an inevitable cost of everything that they believed in. All right, that's all I have for this video on the 7 stages of the villain arc. If this video helped you at all, please like, subscribe to my channel, all of that fun YouTube stuff. And again, if you want the full breakdown, the blog post that this video is based on is going to be linked in the description below. And if you also want a plug and play system that'll help you build your villain, I'm going to be linking the villain workbook PDF in the description below as well. Have fun building a jackass who is hell-bent on destroying the world that you worked so hard to build. See you next time. Bye.